Hello and welcome back to 10 Things About Writing. Today I'm going to talk about getting published, which is a big, complex topic, so I'm only going to address part of it, which is commercial publication via an agent. There are other ways of getting published, lots of them, and also there are lots of people who don't want to be published at all. If you are one of those people who's writing for joy, and not particularly for a readership, then that's fine. You are no less of a writer because of that. You're no less serious a writer because of that. But some people would like to see their book in print on the shelves of a bookshop, and this session is for those people. Now, there's a process that's generally the right process to follow to be commercially published. The first thing, which seems obvious, but some people won't have thought it through, is you need to have a polished, finished, completed manuscript to offer. So many people come to agents and publishers with just an idea. And this might work if you're a celebrity or if you are somebody with a really good track record, but it doesn't work for unknown writers. So don't do it if you are an unknown writer. You need to get your manuscript into as good shape as possible. That means having it properly edited and re-edited and thought through. That doesn't mean to say you won't have to edit it again if it gets accepted, but it needs to be the best you can do at that stage. And then generally you need to find an agent, to go through an agent, because most publishers will not accept unsolicited manuscripts. And even if they did, agents exist for two things: to protect publishers against the tide of authors sending in their work without any triage, but also to protect authors from potentially dangerously exploitative contracts by publishers. So yes, you do need an agent if you want to be commercially published. Some people manage it without an agent, but you know what? All of the ones I have known have ended up getting an agent anyway. Now, to approach an agent, it's quite easy, really. You need to look up the agent's social media presence, their website, and look at their submission guidelines. This is Agenting 101. The first thing to do, look at who they represent, what genre they represent. There's really no point offering your sci-fi fantasy epic to somebody who only looks at screenplays or non-fiction or poetry. Next, look at the submission guidelines and follow them to the letter. Agents tend to have slightly different submission guidelines, so it's quite important not to sort of just take it for granted that what one agent wants is the same as what another agent will want. But generally, it's going to be some variant on the cover letter, synopsis, chunk of manuscript theme. How long the chunk is, that will depend on the agent, but usually you have to write a cover letter in which you will briefly explain who you are and your history and anything you think that's connected to the potential commercial success of your manuscript. And then a short synopsis, and I'm talking about, a page at the most, which will hopefully be a taster for the agent to go. That sounds like an interesting central concept. We'll talk more about synopses later, I think, but for the moment, something that will make the agent want to read the slice of manuscript that you'll send. Most agents want the beginning of the book, the first chapter, the first 3 chapters, or something like that, because it gives them a general sense of how you've been able to enter your story, whether your story is engaging to a reader. There is not much point choosing a particularly fine piece of writing 300 pages in, because out of context, that won't really tell the agent very much at all in terms of how a reader will connect with you as a writer. So once you've decided which agent to send your work to and you've followed their submission guidelines, then really the next thing to do is to wait, and to wait for quite a long time. Waiting isn't always easy. I've never found it easy. And agents tend to have a lot of manuscripts to look at. They will look at, first of all, the ones that are by the clients that they represent. And then they'll have a slush pile, which will be much, much bigger, of people who have just sent manuscripts in on spec. And they'll generally have designated personnel, maybe just 1 or 2 people, if you're lucky, to read through that slush pile. It will take a while. So don't expect anything for at least 3 months, maybe even 6, maybe even longer. While you're waiting, it's probably a good idea to write something else. That way, not only you're still growing, you're still writing, but you're also gaining the objectivity that you will need to deal with either a request for a rewrite or an outright rejection. Either way, neither of those things are particularly easy things to accept, and so writing something else will help you. If the agent doesn't come back to you at all, after let's say 3 or 4 months, it's okay to send them a polite reminder. Don't send them anything before that, because they will not have had time to look at your work, and there's no point being impatient. Remember, when you do get a response, and the response may be either, I read your manuscript, it's not for us, which is fine, that's a standard rejection, there's nothing wrong with that. Or maybe it will be something with a little bit more feedback, like, I read your manuscript, there were some interesting things in there, but ultimately I don't think it's for us, it's not commercial enough. If they give you any feedback at all, absolutely anything at all, try to take it on board. Don't push back against feedback, because no agent owes you feedback. No agent owes you anything, really. So if they've taken the time, it means they care about what you've done. It also could possibly mean that when you've fixed whatever they think is wrong with your book, they might want to see it again. It leaves the door open. If they've even rejected it out of hand and said, well, no, it's not for me, but you know what, there's something about your style which does have promise, then again, you can gently push the door open by saying, what if I wrote something else and sent it to you? Would you read it? And there again, you're establishing a tenuous link, albeit a tenuous one, but you are establishing a line of communication. Those things are valuable. Don't be the asshole when dealing with agents, and a lot of people are. Don't be that person who, because they are angry at being rejected, talks about it on social media or sends back an angry response saying, well, obviously you've got no taste and you don't know what you're talking about. I am going to be a megastar in 3 years' time and you will be sorry. Don't do this. Lots of people do this. Remember, agents are human beings. They may well have made a mistake by rejecting you. On the other hand, they may be professionals who know what they're talking about. You don't know that, but what you do know is that agents will talk to other agents. Agents will talk to publishers. If you get the reputation of being an angry person who pushes back, then nobody will want to work with you, however good you are as a writer, because actually, you know, the world is full of writers. And the world is full of quite decent writers too, and why would you not take one who is able to learn and deal professionally with people in a cheerful and courteous way, rather than an asshole? So don't do that. Don't be that person. Instead, try to learn from any rejection you're given, from any feedback you're given, and it is very much a rinse and repeat situation. Don't be surprised if you're rejected. Nobody likes being rejected. It's awful. Don't believe anyone when they tell you it's not an awful feeling, but it is also part of the process. Everybody you have heard of has been rejected multiple times, and they've learnt from it. That's why you've heard of them. Now, before I go, I'm going to say just one more thing about publishers who aren't publishers. This is for the people who listened to all that stuff that I said about agents and protection and ignored it because they thought they knew better. Now, maybe you do know better. Maybe you will prove me completely wrong and get a great publishing deal without going through an agent. But do beware, because there are a number of vanity presses out there, quite a lot of them now, pretending to be publishers, and they will advertise their wares in magazines, in writers' magazines or online. Sometimes they will even approach you by email saying, oh, I heard that you were a writer, I'd love to see your manuscript. Some of them will have adverts out there going, publishers looking for new manuscripts. In the case of a vanity press, all of this is just a smokescreen to hide the fact that they're out for your money. Now, I'm not linking vanity presses to self-publishing. Those are completely different things. I'm not linking them to small publishers. Again, completely different things. The way to spot a vanity press is they will promise you publication, editorial work, distribution, all the things a real publisher will promise you. But they will ask you for money in return. As soon as a publisher asks you for money, they're not a publisher. They're a print-on-demand service. Now, there are print-on-demand services that are perfectly legit, and actually there is a use for these things. You know, I've used them before too. I make photo books for my friends and for my daughter, and I use a print-on-demand service. I use lulu.com, and I have 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 copies of my little book printed, and I pay for that, and that's fine. Because sometimes all you want is a dozen copies of something special that you want to give to friends. But if you want to be sold in shops, if you want shops to stock your book, then a print-on-demand service obviously is going to be no good for you, nor will a vanity publisher be. Some of them can be very, very persuasive. But the bottom line is, if they are asking you to pay money to be printed, then they are not actually a publisher. Do beware of them. If what you would like is a print-on-demand service, check out all the ones available online. There are some really good ones. But avoid vanity publishers like the plague. They're extremely exploitative. They particularly target older people who don't necessarily know the difference between a small press and a vanity publisher. And they are not good people, and they are not on your side. Tomorrow, in our last session, I'm going to talk about discouragement and rejection and guilt and writer's block and all the things that kind of come with the turf when you're a writer, but most writers don't talk about. So join me then. Until then, goodbye.